will continue in eternity. Now, the second communion is the sacramental communion, which is the reception of the consecrated species. That had traditionally carried the name communion, to the neglect of the doxology. But there are many things in our theology that we are balancing and correcting only now. That's why yesterday I intentionally pointed out the imbalance about the consecration in the history of dogma. The history of dogma, the theology of consecration was post-Reformation. That is part of our counter-Reformation, emphasizing in the defense of the clergy the irreplaceability of priests, however sinful. Because without the potestas consecrandi, the whole of Christendom has nothing to offer worthy of God. Union. But anyway, we are achieving it. Although 50 years of liturgical renewal, there are still many things that actually are lying there by the wayside, because there are so many things to attend to. And that's why we need things like this, part of your ongoing formation, where somehow we manage to clear up one item at a time. But then there is another communion that we already noted without naming it so. When we said that there is that ecclesiality, that ecclesia dimension. Now, that ecclesia had not been properly appreciated. The first sign of this misplaced appreciation is our confusion about names, about terms, that we have in Filipino been satisfied with the secondary meaning of ecclesia as simbahan, the place of worship, completely neglecting the biblical primary meaning of the word kahal or the word ecclesia, and that is God's gathered people, the gathered ones, yung mga tinipon. And now we are recovering that. That is our level of communion, even prior to doxology. So that we can have doxology, we must first encounter Christ in His mystical body, the church. That's why we must gather together. That's why there is no private Eucharist. That's why every Eucharist is by definition an ecclesial act, an ecclesial event. That is why the Eucharist cannot be privatized. It must be in the name of the whole church. Therefore, it is presided over, led by one ordained, empowered in persona ecclesiae, and that is the ordained priest. Without the ordained priest, there is no Eucharist. The very fact that there is a gathering around the priest, led by the priest, the first communion takes place already, the ecclesial communion. And it is this ecclesial communion that we are still in the process of discovering fully. Always still violated unknowingly when we allow the Mass, for example, to be partisan. One image of this is that the Eucharist is celebrated by one group of people demonstrating against another group. When the Eucharist is celebrated, it is to invite all the groups together. You cannot celebrate the Eucharist for one group exclusively. It must always be Catholic, inclusive of everyone. The Eucharist is where communion takes place. And that is why it must stand for communion. It must never be abused for exclusion, for one group against another. So this is a little reminder. Do not allow yourselves to be used that the pious gesture of celebrating Mass by one group fighting against another group. Your role is to celebrate the Eucharist on a neutral ground and invite both parties, but not for one against the other. And it is this same meaning that is violated by another instance when a parish priest or a pastor celebrates Mass with very obvious anger against any person in the community and practically sending away any such violation on the part of the priest on his own against the baptismal rites of the believer. You cannot excommunicate someone on your own. It is very serious. It is so serious in chapter 18 the other day we saw you must go through step 1, step 2, step 3 before you come. You come to, and then who will decide it? You tell the church and the church. Wow! You tell the church and the church will consider the person persisting in sin as among outsiders. But a parish priest does not have the authority to exclude or excommunitize anyone. The priest at this level has only one function: to invite, to lead in, to promote the bonding of faith. Okay, so I brought that in, this initial communion. So actually, what happens? Where is Christ present? Not only when you are communicating with the Trinity, not only with the bread and wine, where 2 or 3 are gathered. Again, we heard that